All right, lucky us, Steve. As you can see behind me, we continue to see the wind howling. Visibility greatly reduced. The winds are still from the northeast. So my suspicion is this eye wall will pass overhead, but will probably not go to our west. But nonetheless, Steve, we have had winds close to hurricane force already. Many trees down in the area. As mentioned, the power's out. Cable's out too, unfortunately. So we are hunkered down here, and we are just going to ride it out as we see.
All right, thanks so much, Bill Keneally. We will be checking back with you a little bit later in about half an hour. Of course, we are monitoring the situation with Hurricane Bonnie making landfall in the next few hours. Let's check on the latest statistics with the hurricane. Once again, a Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Winds up there about 115. And there you have the latest information. 65 miles south of Wilmington, North Carolina, moving north at 12 miles per hour. Of course, we still have the hurricane watches and warnings in effect. We do want to emphasize that you will be feeling the effects of this hurricane possibly on up into southern New England as the evening progresses and on into tomorrow. And we'll talk more about that forecast in just a moment. As we look at this satellite vantage point, Steve, tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here.
Okay, you can see some of the high clouds streaming off to the north, but unfortunately that streaming was a little late and it didn't catch the hurricane before it is coming ashore, and it's not going to. It's a very big circulation, winds wrapping all the way around here out of the south and into the east on this side, and of course very, very strong winds coming up out of the south. Right now, from basically Cape Fear out to Cape Hatteras area here, this area in here is going to experience a very, very high storm surge and very, very high surf. We've seen some wave highs out there as high as 30 feet.
Okay, and that is the area that we want to go to right now with more live reports. Of course, we have our own Jim Cantori standing by in Morehead City, and Jeff Morrow is in Nags Head. We go first of all to Jim Cantori. Jim, tell us what you're experiencing right now.
Well, Janetta, we continue to get an increase in the wind gusts. I mean, they're more frequent, they're a little bit stronger, more like what you would see in the tropical storm force band winds and rain that come on through. We've also had some pretty heavy showers. I've got a handheld anemometer with me, and I can pretty much detect that we have almost a due northeast wind right now. And that is great news here where I am on the north end of Bogue Sound, which is on the mainland. Across the mainland, we have the Bogue Bank, so I'm like in the central part of that. And what you're basically seeing is just a mist and haze over those banks with the northeast winds. But what they're getting is flooding on the back side of the barrier island. In other words, on the north-facing side of the barrier island with the northeast winds, that's where the coastal flooding is occurring. Right here, we're fine because the wind is going offshore. Typically, during a high tide, too, you'll notice that seawall that's out near this inlet that I'm at, that is usually covered during the time of high tide, and that's where we're at right now. But now the winds are blowing offshore, that's not even covered. So that's great news for now. But as those winds change around to the south, that's going to be a whole different story, and we can easily see that at the time of high tide as we get into this afternoon. So that's going to be something we're going to be watching for you. Back to you, Janetta.
All right, well, Jim, I guess I'll take it over from Janetta, and we're up here in Nags Head, North Carolina, where things are much more tranquil than what, of course, you are, Jim, and Bill earlier down in Wrightsville Beach are experiencing. We're still getting some fairly heavy surf here, probably on the order of about 8 to 10 feet, some of the higher breakers well offshore. The tide is actually high at the present time and starting to retreat a little bit. So we have not had any reports of any overwash up here so far. But I suspect that the next high tide that we get, which will be sometime late this evening, toward the midnight hour, that may change a lot as Hurricane Bonnie continues its track slowly to the north. We're well to the north of the hurricane, so we're not feeling anywhere near the full effects yet, but it may only be a matter of time here as we head through the rest of the day and the overnight hours when Bonnie's wrath comes this way. We'll keep you updated from Nags Head. Now let's go back to Janetta.
All right, thanks so much, Jeff Morrow. We will be checking back in with all three of those fellas later on throughout the afternoon to see how things are progressing or how things are deteriorating. I'm joined now, of course, by Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist here. It's a very serious situation, especially when you get the battering of the coast for such a prolonged period of time. Tell us a little bit about how that can affect folks.
Well, especially with beach erosion, the longer you have strong winds and high waves, the more beach erosion you're going to get, especially if you have longshore currents like we have, especially along Nags Head right now. But it's going to be pretty bad the next 6 to 12 hours, and it's a very large hurricane. So the effects, the duration of the strong winds is going to be longer.
And of course, the storm surge, one of the most dangerous aspects of any hurricane, is going to be significant here, 9 to 11 feet perhaps.
That's right. Depending on where you are, it can be very large. And here's an example here. We can see the hurricane here. The maximum storm surge will be just to the right of the hurricane at landfall, which should be somewhere over in here. And but then as the hurricane moves inland, even though it's weakening, these winds over here are going to strengthen out of the southeast and east, and that's going to push water inland over here. And of course, keep in mind in here you can get some flooding well away from the coast in the backwater as it fills up.
Force winds now extend outward up to 115 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 230 miles, which is what you were saying earlier. It's just a massive coverage area with this storm.
That's right, and that makes the wind component to the wave growth very large, and we're actually going to get some water rise of about 3 to 5 feet associated with the breaking surf on the south-facing portions of North Carolina.
Okay, something we'll have to watch. Checking the current winds that we're seeing, of course, winds up to 47 miles per hour, maybe even 50 miles per hour. We did have one report of 101 mile per hour wind gusts near Frying Pan Shoals, but you expect that this is just going to get worse.
Yes, onshore it will definitely get worse before it gets better. So I hope you're all hunkered down, and if you're not, get there soon.
Do want to mention we have the tornado watch in effect, and this is going to affect folks all the way up the eastern seaboard. As we get through tonight and into tomorrow, we may see more rain, right?
That's right. This is sort of a generic track out through time on where we think it might be somewhere in this swath. And of course, depending on where it is, it could affect significantly the eastern seaboard with a front coming up here and produce a lot of rain here. So you people up in the northeast should pay attention to this as well, which way it goes, because you could be affected as well.
All right, we'll keep you posted. Now we're going to go back to the studio for a look at what else is happening. Of course, if you're away from your television set, you can get the latest information on weather.com.
The unrelenting wind of Hurricane Bonnie continues to increase here on the beaches in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. A full report on Weather Center coming up next.
I'm Jim Cantori in Morehead City. The winds are picking up, and we've got reports now of trees down. We'll have a full report in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Thanks for joining us for Weather Center. I'm Janetta Jones, joined by Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist. We are monitoring what's going on with Hurricane Bonnie as it continues to batter the North Carolina coast. Steve, landfall in about 5 hours or so?
Yeah, between 5 and 7 hours it looks like the center should pass over the coast of North Carolina, somewhere near Bill Keneally's location.
We want to emphasize that just because we're saying landfall in 5 to 7 hours doesn't mean you're not going to feel the effects earlier than that.
Oh, that's right. As a matter of fact, this storm system has a rather unique characteristic that we seem to be finding out on the radar here, that a lot of the strongest winds may already be very close to the coast or occurring as the system's starting to sort of spread out a little bit. But the big wave action along that south coast of North Carolina is already occurring.
All right, as we look at the radar, you can see the massive coverage with this hurricane. It is a very large hurricane by scale, and the eye still clearly visible and offshore.
That's right. The circulation center about right here, and we've been tracking it on radar. It looks like it's been moving north at about 10 miles per hour. The National Hurricane Center is getting an estimate of about 12. So 10 to 12 mile an hour, generally a northward track straight from here, heading generally toward Cape Fear. If that continues, it would be very close to Cape Fear, North Carolina.
Of course, we are going to feel the impact from this hurricane in other locations. Can you tell us how it may affect folks in the Northeast?
Well, that's an interesting question here. You can see some of this very strong wind coming up way out here. Well, that strong wind has generated a lot of swell, and that swell is a done deal. That's already going up to the northeast. It'll affect some portions of the Jersey Shore and, of course, Manhattan, Long Island in particular. So you're going to get some big surf up there, and that may be a problem for you there, no matter what happens to the track of Bonnie afterwards.
I can't help but notice the eye. It's so clearly visible on this particular shot.
Yeah, there's a very large circulation there, and on our radar imagery and on the buoy observations, we found that it looks like there's sort of a broad area of winds. The winds are expanding out a little bit, so we may be a little bit better off than we thought. However, we still have had gusts to over 100 miles an hour at that buoy out there, and we just had a report at Frying Pan Shoals Wind is from the east at 55 miles per hour. Pressure is 969 millibars, and that's coming closer into the center of the circulation, so the wind is dropping off from 100 down to about 55.
Okay, very interesting. Of course, we have several live crews out there covering this for us, and
Very active weather continues here in Morgan City, North Carolina. We'll let you and give you a full update here in just a moment. Stay tuned.
And the waves are building in Nags Head, North Carolina, as Hurricane Bonnie prepares to collide with the U.S. coastline. Thanks for joining us for Weather Center. I'm Janetta Jones in the Forecast Center. I'm joined by Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist. We're tracking Bonnie as it makes landfall in the next 4 to 5, maybe even 6 hours. But of course, we're already feeling the effects.
Absolutely, and of course, as we've been saying all day, don't pay too much attention to the actual landfall position, because we've measured some very strong winds well east of the center. So well away from the center, you could get a lot of damage.
And as the squalls move in, checking the radar, we can already see the bands of heavy rainfall, even some thunderstorms. We do have a tornado watch in effect for portions of the coast.
That's right. As a matter of fact, we've been looking at the Wilmington radar, and the inbound velocities on that radar that give you an estimate of how strong the wind is coming toward the radar are on the order of about 120 miles per hour up above the ground, well above the ground. So that portion of the circulation on the east side looks like it's going to be the most dangerous in the next 6 hours.
And of course, one of the most dangerous aspects of this will be with the storm surge to the north of the center.
That's right, to the right front quadrant, and that storm surge should be on the rise right now.
All right, 9 to 11 feet is what we're thinking right now.
Exactly.
All right, checking the satellite vantage point, tell us a little bit about the eye and what you can see there.
Well, we had a smaller circulation within this earlier, but now we have a rather large eye, and the winds inside here are relatively weak, but the winds coming around the outside on these bands and in toward the coast in this general direction are very, very strong, and those are the ones we've been watching from the Wilmington radar coming in here at about 120 miles an hour above the ground. That won't be that strong at the ground, we don't think, but it could be easily 100 knots, which is 115 miles an hour.
All right, and we have a crew standing by in that general area, Wrightsville Beach, and that is Bill Keneally. Bill, can you tell us what you're feeling right now?
Okay, thank you, Janetta. We do see an awful lot of wind out here at this hour. We've had some damage reported too, not on our hotel roof, but the hotel roof right next to us. And my cameraman Randy's going to pan around. He'll be able to take a look around the corner here, and we can see there is a tree. It looks like an oak tree that has been snapped roughly halfway up, and that has dropped itself down on a restaurant next door. We're really catching quite a wind gust at this hour, Janetta. And again, one of those such gusts up around 70 miles per hour is what pulled down that tree branch, or I should say that tree there. So the winds are howling out here. It looks like another concentric band is coming at us. Still waiting on that eye wall, though, as it does agonizingly slowly approach the Bald Head Island area down towards Cape Fear. And it looks as though our worst fears will be realized, as that eye wall will likely strafe the coast here at Wrightsville Beach later on this afternoon.
Matter of fact, it is slowing down a little bit. Latest information indicating it's moving north at 10 miles per hour instead of the 12. Want to show you the latest statistics on Hurricane Bonnie as we continue once again, not north at 12 anymore, north at 10 miles per hour as of the latest information. Still about 65 miles south of Wilmington, North Carolina. Winds 115 miles per hour. Steve, that categorizes it as a 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, which is a major hurricane.
That is correct.
And we can expect some structural damage right along the coast. Some residences, utility buildings will see some damage, and maybe even flooding near the coast, destroying some small structures and larger structures, damaging winds could cause some problems there. As we check out the hurricane warnings that are in effect, not a whole lot of change here. Looking at the satellite vantage point, we've talked about this for the last few days, but this is a very large hurricane.
That's right. The area of hurricane force winds is very large. Right now, the circulation center is about right there, and the real strong winds are wrapping in this way. Jim Cantori will experience some squall line coming in there associated with that band here in another hour or two, and his wind should pick up very quickly. but it's really a large circulation. This whole area is encompassing the circulation of the hurricane, and so we should see some effects on the eastern side of North Carolina here later this afternoon.
All right, as a matter of fact, we're going to try and go to Jim Cantori live now. He is in Morehead City. And Jim, what are you experiencing now?
Oh, Janetta, it's just absolutely pouring here. We've also seen a definitive change in the wind direction from the northeast to the east. Looking behind me is to the south. I'm going to actually show you off to the west here with our tower cam right now. You can see these trees that are nearby. I'm in a subdivision very much in the middle, if you will, of the sound. And that is where we are right now in the Bogue Sound area. And we're on the north side, we're on the mainland. And you can see the wind as it sways these trees around. Now we have heard on Route 24 heading back toward Morehead City, which is to our east, about 10 miles, there is tree damage. There is tree damage right now. There are trees snapped off, and there is some damage. Some trees are laying in the roads and whatnot. And we did have a squall that moved through here easily with 60, 65 mile per hour winds. And folks, if you're watching that local radar, keep an eye on those bands, because that is where you're going to get the worst weather with. And we do have that one moving through right here in Morehead City. Other than that, we're just kind of awaiting the worst. We have a few more bands to go. And Janetta, we will let you know how things make out here in Morehead City. Back to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Jim Cantori reporting live. I'm joined by Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist. Steve, we are watching the possibility for quite a bit of storm surge, 9 to 11 feet.
That's rather typical of a Category 3 hurricane. 8 to 12. The Hurricane Center's been going with about 9 to 11. And that can occur both on the south coast of North Carolina and on the east coast of North Carolina. Later this afternoon more, and this evening more on the east coast. Right now and the next few hours on the south coast.
Okay, very, very serious situation shaping up there.
That's
Want
right.
to go over where the hurricane force winds do extend out from. If you're going out from the center, they extend outward up to 115 miles, and tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 230 miles. So this is a massive coverage with this thing. At one point today, we did have a wind gust of 101 reported at Frying Pan Shoals, I believe.
That's correct.
Earlier today, and that's a look at some of the other current winds that are being reported. Tell you what, we're going to go to Jeff Morrow now, live in Nags Head, North Carolina. Jeff, can you tell us what you're seeing right now?
Still a pretty rough ocean day, but nothing on the order of what they're having farther down the coast where Jim Cantori and Bill Keneally are. What we do have is a special guest right now from the Red Cross, Jackie Wright. And Jackie, tell us a little bit about what the Red Cross is doing as far as shelters across Virginia and North Carolina.
The Red Cross is working very hard. There have been 125 shelters open, and 16,000 people have come to the Red Cross for a safe haven.
What other services are you offering? What's the Red Cross doing right now?
Well, besides the mass care that we're providing now through our shelters, we have 115 emergency response vehicles that are on standby that are ready to come in as soon as the storm hits so that we can be able to provide food to the people that are cleaning up, help the emergency workers, and do the work that we do to help people respond in the time of disaster.
All right, thank you very much, Jackie Wright with the Red Cross. And of course, Red Cross will be standing by, and hopefully they won't be needed too much, but it sounds pretty bad down there along the southeast North Carolina coast. We'll keep you updated here, still waiting the arrival of Bonnie a little bit later on today or tonight. Back to you, Janetta.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Dr. Steve Lyons joining me now, hurricane specialist. Of course, we do have the threat of severe weather along with a hurricane. We have to remember a tornado watch is in effect. We can show everyone that right now. This is not the biggest threat, but it certainly is a threat.
Especially in those big rain bands that are coming ashore, it's not impossible to see tornado activity, especially right of the hurricane center.
Okay, we'll have to keep an eye on that throughout the afternoon. Now, looking ahead into the forecast, a little uncertain at this point, but what are you expecting?
Well, right now it's still moving at 10 miles an hour. It's gradually slowing a little bit, and some of the models have it slowing quite a bit, and if it slows as much as some of them say, we could have a major rain problem over North Carolina as well as storm surge and everything else. But in general, we still are going with the National Hurricane Center thoughts that it will continue on to the north and then to the northeast offshore in the next 24 hours. But it still could affect the northeast already with swell, but down the road also with winds.
And in the next 48 hours, we could be talking about an effect for folks in New England.
That's quite possible.
Okay, we will be watching that very closely over the next couple of days. It's not just today and tonight. Thank you so much, Dr. Steve Lyons. And as always, if you have other questions about this hurricane, you can tap into the Weather Channel's online service at weather.com if you're away from your television set. Now we go back to the studio for a look at the forecast.
And thanks, Janetta. Good afternoon. This Weather Center is brought to you by Subaru. Sunshine is making its way into the northeast after a rainy morning, but the picture isn't bright in the northern plains. Severe weather is possible today. Here's a look at the current radar satellite composite. And as we add the surface features, you can see there is frontal system pushing into the northeastern portion of the country, the leading edge of some of that cooler, drier, more stable Canadian air. Before it arrives, though, you will have to deal with whatever's in store in terms of Hurricane Bonnie.